He built walls to keep the pain out. She smiled once, and every wall came crashing down. Ryan had always been the kind of guy who liked things simple and predictable. Wake up at 6:30, hit the gym for exactly 45 minutes, shower, dress in one of his 5 identical work outfits, and be at his desk by 8:15. He'd been doing the same job at the same tech company for almost 9 years now. His apartment looked exactly like it did the day he moved in, except for the laptop that got upgraded every 2 years. His friends used to joke that he was like a robot, but Ryan didn't mind. There was comfort in knowing what each day would bring. No surprises meant no disappointments. He'd learned that lesson the hard way after his last relationship ended badly 6 years ago. Since then, he'd kept his head down, focused on work, and built a life that was safe, even if it was a bit boring. It was a regular Tuesday morning in October when everything changed. The entire company had been buzzing for weeks about the merger. Some bigger company from California was taking them over, and everyone was nervous about layoffs and changes. Ryan wasn't too worried. He was good at his job, kept to himself, and figured he'd survive whatever corporate nonsense was coming. The conference room was packed. Ryan grabbed his usual spot in the back corner, opened his laptop, and prepared to zone out through another pointless meeting. The CEO droned on about exciting opportunities and synergies and all the usual corporate talk that meant absolutely nothing. Then she walked in. Her name was Isabella, and she was the new creative director from the California company. She moved to the front of the room with this confident energy that made everyone sit up a little straighter. She wore this deep red blazer that somehow looked both professional and completely different from anything anyone else in that boring office ever wore. Ryan told himself to focus on his laptop. This was just another executive, another presentation, nothing special. But then she started talking, and her voice had this warm musical quality that cut through the usual monotone of corporate meetings. She wasn't reading from slides. She was actually talking to people, making eye contact, asking questions. She presented ideas that were bold and creative, suggesting they completely overhaul products that had been the same for years. The senior vice president, this older guy named Patterson who thought he knew everything, interrupted her. His tone was dismissive, almost mocking. He basically told her that her ideas were too risky, that they didn't understand how things worked at a real company. The room went quiet. Everyone expected her to back down. That's what usually happened when Patterson used that tone. Instead, Isabella stopped talking. She took a slow breath, tilted her head slightly, and looked directly at Patterson. And then she smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It wasn't one of those fake corporate smiles people use when they're trying to keep the peace. This smile was something else entirely. It was knowing. It was confident. It was the smile of someone who had an ace up their sleeve and was just waiting for the right moment to play it. Ryan felt something strange happen in his chest. His heart actually skipped a beat. Time seemed to slow down. He couldn't look away from her face, from that smile that somehow managed to be both beautiful and a little bit dangerous. Isabella let the silence stretch for just a few seconds longer, then spoke in a calm, steady voice. She pulled up a slide showing market research, competitor analysis, and profit projections that completely destroyed Patterson's argument. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't get defensive. She just methodically proved him wrong with facts and data, all while maintaining that slight, knowing smile. Patterson's face turned red. The CEO looked impressed, and Ryan realized he'd been holding his breath the entire time. When the meeting finally wrapped up, people started filing out. Ryan usually bolted from these things as fast as possible, but something made him move slower. He found himself trying to catch another glimpse of Isabella as she gathered her materials. As if she could feel him looking, she glanced up. Their eyes met across the crowded conference room, and she gave him that same smile. That dangerous, knowing smile that seemed to see right through all the walls he'd built around himself. Ryan's carefully organized thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm. His pulse quickened. His palms actually got sweaty, which hadn't happened since he was a teenager. He managed something that might have been a nod, then turned and walked out, his mind spinning. The rest of that day was a blur. Ryan tried to focus on his code, on the project deadline coming up, on anything but that smile. But his thoughts kept drifting back to the conference room, to the way Isabella had commanded the space, to that moment when she'd looked directly at him. He told himself it was nothing. She probably looked at everyone that way. She probably didn't even remember it. He was just another face in a crowd of boring tech workers. Besides, he didn't do this anymore. He didn't get interested in people. He had his routine, his safe, predictable life, and that was enough. But that night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling of his perfectly organized bedroom, Ryan couldn't stop thinking about her. About that smile. About the way his entire world seemed to pause for just a moment when their eyes met. He'd spent 9 years building a life where nothing unexpected could happen, where nothing could hurt him, where every day was the same safe pattern. And in the span of 30 seconds, one woman with one dangerous smile had made all of that feel suddenly, terrifyingly fragile. Ryan rolled over, punched his pillow, and tried to sleep. Tomorrow would be different, he told himself. Tomorrow he'd go back to his routine, forget about Isabella and her smile, and everything would go back to normal. But deep down, in a place he didn't want to acknowledge, Ryan knew something fundamental had shifted. The carefully constructed walls around his heart had developed a crack, and he had a sinking feeling that crack was about to become a canyon. He fell asleep that night with her smile burned into his mind, and for the first time in 6 years, Ryan dreamed about someone other than himself. When he woke up the next morning, his alarm going off at the usual 6:30, he realized with a mix of terror and excitement that his predictable life might be about to get very, very complicated. The next few days were strange for Ryan. He kept telling himself to act normal, to stick to his routine, to forget about that moment in the conference room. But Isabella seemed to be everywhere. On Wednesday, he saw her in the cafeteria, laughing with some people from the design team. Her laugh was loud and genuine, not the polite corporate chuckle most people used at work. On Thursday, she was at his favorite coffee shop across the street, ordering some complicated drink with extra shots and caramel. On Friday, she walked past his desk twice, both times on her phone, speaking rapid Spanish to someone and gesturing with her free hand. Ryan wondered if the universe was playing some kind of joke on him. In 9 years of working at this company, he'd barely noticed most of his co-workers. Now he couldn't seem to go 2 hours without running into Isabella somewhere. His friend Carlos noticed the change. They'd been having lunch together every Tuesday and Thursday for 5 years. Always at the same sandwich shop, always ordering the same things. "You're distracted," Carlos said, biting into his turkey club. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Ryan lied, stabbing at his salad. "Just thinking about the merger." Carlos raised an eyebrow. "You've never cared about corporate politics before. This is about something else. Or someone else." Ryan's silence was apparently answer enough. Carlos grinned. "It's that new director, isn't it, Isabella? Half the office is already talking about her." "I'm not interested," Ryan said quickly. Too quickly. "Right," Carlos said, not believing him for a second. "That's why you've been checking your phone every 5 minutes and looking at the door every time someone walks in." Ryan wanted to argue, but Carlos wasn't wrong. He had been doing exactly that. It was annoying and stupid and completely unlike him. "Even if I was interested, which I'm not," Ryan said carefully, "it wouldn't matter. I don't do relationships. You know that." Carlos's expression softened. "Ryan, man, that was 6 years ago. You can't let one bad breakup control your whole life." "I'm not letting anything control my life," Ryan insisted. "I'm just being smart. Relationships are messy and complicated, and they always end badly. I'm better off alone." "You're not better off," Carlos said quietly. "You're just safer. There's a difference." Before Ryan could respond, his phone buzzed with a calendar notification. "Team assignment meeting in 10 minutes. He grabbed his trash and stood up. "I gotta go." "Think about what I said," Carlos called after him. Ryan didn't want to think about it. He wanted to focus on work, on code, on anything but feelings and relationships and dangerous smiles. The team assignment meeting was in a small conference room on the 3rd floor. Ryan walked in to find 5 other people already seated, including the project manager, Linda, who was known for being no-nonsense and efficient. And sitting directly across from where the only empty chair was, looking at her laptop with that same focused intensity she'd had during her presentation, was Isabella. Ryan's heart did that annoying skip thing again. He considered turning around and claiming he was in the wrong meeting, but Linda looked up and waved him in. "Perfect, everyone's here. Let's get started." Ryan sat down very carefully, not looking at Isabella, and opened his laptop. Linda launched into an explanation of their new project. They were redesigning the company's main product from the ground up, and this team would be responsible for the prototype. It was ambitious and risky, and exactly the kind of thing the old company would never have attempted. Isabella will be leading the creative vision, Linda said. Ryan, you're our senior developer, so you'll be translating her concepts into actual working code. You two will need to work closely together. Of course they would. The universe was definitely laughing at him now. I've set up daily check-ins for you both, Linda continued. Starting tomorrow at 9. You'll need to coordinate on basically everything, so clear communication is essential. The meeting continued, but Ryan barely heard the rest of it. His mind was stuck on the phrase, work closely. Together. That meant hours of interaction, meetings, collaboration, actually talking to Isabella instead of just seeing her from across a room. When the meeting ended, people started gathering their things. Ryan moved quickly, hoping to escape before he had to actually speak to her. Ryan, right? Too late. He turned to find Isabella standing right next to him, hand extended. Up close, he noticed details he'd missed before. The tiny scar above her left eyebrow, the silver rings on 3 of her fingers, the fact that her eyes were this unusual shade of green that seemed to shift in the light. Yeah, he managed, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm and warm. Ryan Torres, Isabella Moreno, she said, even though he obviously already knew. I'm looking forward to working with you. Linda says you're the best developer they have. I'm competent, Ryan said, immediately wanting to kick himself. Competent? That was the best he could do, but Isabella just laughed. Not at him, but like she found his modesty genuinely amusing. Well, I hope you're more than competent because this project is going to be intense. I don't do anything halfway. I noticed, Ryan said before he could stop himself. In the meeting. With Patterson. Her eyes lit up with recognition. You were there. In the back, right? I remember you, she remembered him. Ryan's brain short-circuited for a second. Yeah, that was impressive. The way you handled him. Isabella's expression shifted, becoming more serious. I've dealt with a lot of Pattersons in my career. Men who think being loud makes them right. You have to show them facts, not feelings. That's the only language they understand. There was something in her tone, a hint of old frustration or maybe pain, that made Ryan curious. But before he could respond, Isabella glanced at her phone and made a face. I have another meeting in 5 minutes on the other side of the building, but I'll see you tomorrow, 9 a.m. I'll be there, Ryan said. She gave him a quick smile, not the dangerous one from before, just a normal, friendly smile, and headed for the door. At the last second, she turned back. Oh, and Ryan, loosen up a little. We're going to be spending a lot of time together. Might as well enjoy it. Then she was gone, leaving Ryan standing alone in the conference room, his carefully controlled life feeling less controlled by the minute. That night, Ryan couldn't focus on his usual routine. He tried watching his favorite show, but he couldn't follow the plot. He tried reading, but the words just blurred together. Finally, he gave up and went to bed early, lying in the dark and thinking about tomorrow's meeting. He was nervous, which was ridiculous. It was just a work meeting, just a project, nothing to be anxious about. But as Ryan finally drifted off to sleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow was going to change something. That daily meetings with Isabella were going to crack open the safe, predictable life he'd built. And the scariest part was that some tiny part of him, the part he usually kept locked away, was actually excited about it. The first few meetings with Isabella were surprisingly easy. She'd show up with wild ideas sketched on her tablet, concepts that seemed impossible to code, and Ryan would figure out how to make them work. They fell into a rhythm. She'd dream big. He'd ground it in reality, and somehow they'd meet in the middle with something better than either of them could have created alone. But Ryan noticed other things too. The way Isabella talked with her hands when she got excited about an idea. How she always brought 2 coffees to their morning meetings, one for her and one for him, and somehow always remembered that he liked his with just a little cream. The way she'd sometimes go quiet in the middle of a conversation, staring out the window with this distant look in her eyes, like she was somewhere else entirely. 3 weeks into the project, they were working late in one of the small conference rooms. Most of the office had cleared out. It was just the 2 of them, a half-eaten pizza between them and a whiteboard covered in diagrams and notes. Okay, but what if we flip the whole user interface? Isabella said, jumping up and grabbing a marker. Instead of making them click through menus, what if everything was gesture-based? Ryan leaned back in his chair watching her sketch on the whiteboard. That would require completely rebuilding the core architecture. We're talking months of extra work. But would it be better? Isabella challenged, turning to face him. Ryan considered it honestly. Yeah, it would be way better. More intuitive. More modern. But Linda will never approve the timeline extension. So we don't tell her yet, Isabella said with that mischievous smile. We build a prototype on our own time, show her what it could be, and then ask for the extension. That's... Ryan started to say it was against protocol, against the rules, against every systematic approach he believed in, but looking at Isabella's excited face at the possibility sparking in her eyes, he found himself saying, "That's actually a pretty good plan." Yes, Isabella pumped her fist in the air like a kid who just won a game. I knew you had some rule breaker in you. I could tell from that first meeting. What do you mean? Ryan asked, genuinely curious. Isabella sat down on the edge of the table, much closer to him now. When Patterson was being an idiot and I smiled at him, everyone else in that room was looking down or away, embarrassed or uncomfortable. But you were actually watching. Really watching. Like you were analyzing the whole situation. And when I looked at you, you didn't look away. Most people do. Ryan felt his face getting warm. I was just curious about how you'd handle it. No, Isabella said softly. You were interested. There's a difference. The air in the room felt suddenly heavy. Ryan knew he should change the subject, get back to work, maintain professional boundaries. Instead, he heard himself ask, "Why did you smile at me?" At the end of that meeting? Isabella was quiet for a moment, studying his face. Honestly, I don't know. There was just something about the way you were sitting there, all proper and controlled, but your eyes were so focused. It's like there was this whole other person under the surface that you were keeping locked up. It made me curious. About what? About who you really are when you're not being so careful all the time. Ryan's heart was pounding now. This conversation had crossed some invisible line. They were in dangerous territory, the kind that led to complications and messy feelings, and exactly what he'd been avoiding for 6 years. I should go, he said, starting to pack up his laptop. It's late. Ryan, wait. Isabella's hand touched his arm, gentle but enough to make him stop. Did I say something wrong? No, Ryan said, and it was true. That's the problem. You said something right, and that scares me. Why? And somehow, maybe because it was late and he was tired, or maybe because Isabella had this way of making him feel safe enough to be honest, Ryan found himself talking, actually talking about things he never discussed. 6 years ago I was engaged, he said, not looking at her. Her name was Rachel. We'd been together since college. I thought we were building this perfect life together. Then one day I came home early from a work trip and found her with someone else. In our apartment. In our bed. Isabella's hand tightened slightly on his arm, but she didn't interrupt. It wasn't just the cheating, Ryan continued. It was that I'd completely missed it. I'd been so focused on our plans, our timeline, our future, that I didn't see what was happening right in front of me. She told me I was boring, predictable, that being with me was like being alone, except worse because I was actually there. That's awful, Isabella said quietly. But you know that says way more about her than about you, right? Ryan shrugged. Maybe, but after that I decided it was easier to just not do this, not get close to people, keep everything simple and controlled so I couldn't get hurt again. And it's worked? Isabella asked. You're happy? Ryan finally looked at her. I was fine. Until about 3 weeks ago. Understanding crossed Isabella's face. She moved her hand from his arm but didn't step away. Ryan, I'm going to tell you something and I need you to really hear it. That thing Rachel said about you being boring, that's garbage. Stable doesn't mean boring. Thoughtful doesn't mean boring. You're one of the most interesting people I've met in a long time. You barely know me. I know you spend 20 minutes making sure a single line of code is perfect because you care about doing things right. I know you listen when people talk instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. I know you notice things like how I get quieter when I'm stressed or how I tap my pen when I'm thinking. Those aren't boring qualities. Those are rare qualities. Ryan didn't know what to say. For 6 years he'd believed Rachel's words, that he was too safe, too predictable, not exciting enough. Hearing Isabella contradict all of that felt like someone had turned on a light in a room he'd thought was permanently dark. I should tell you something too, Isabella said, her voice softer now. I'm not good at staying. I've lived in 6 different cities in the last 8 years. I take jobs and then get restless and move on. The longest relationship I've ever had lasted 11 months before I sabotaged it because things were getting too serious. I'm really good at being intense and exciting at the beginning, but then I get scared and I run. Why are you telling me this? Ryan asked. Isabella met his eyes, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked uncertain. Because I need you to know what you'd be getting into if this becomes something. Which maybe it shouldn't, because I'm a mess and you've already been hurt and we work together, and there are about 17 reasons this is a terrible idea. 17? Ryan found himself almost smiling, at least Isabella said. But here's the thing. I really like working with you. I like talking to you. And when I look at you, I don't want to run, which is new for me. And terrifying. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything they'd just admitted hanging in the air between them. Finally, Ryan spoke. What if we just see what happens? No pressure. No timeline. Just keep working together and being honest and not overthinking it. You? Not overthinking something? Isabella's smile was back, but gentler now. That seems unlikely. I know, Ryan admitted. But maybe it's time I tried something different. Isabella studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, let's try something different. She stood up, started gathering her things. At the door, she paused and looked back at him. For what it's worth, Ryan, Rachel was an idiot, and I'm really glad you were in that meeting 3 weeks ago. After she left, Ryan sat alone in the conference room for a while, processing everything. He'd broken his own rules tonight. Opened up, admitted feelings, agreed to try something that scared him. And the weirdest part? He felt lighter than he had in years. Like he'd been carrying something heavy and hadn't even realized it until he finally put it down. Ryan packed up his laptop and headed home through the empty office. Tomorrow he'd probably panic about all of this. Tonight he was just going to let himself feel hopeful for the first time in a very long time. The next 3 months were the best Ryan had experienced in years. He and Isabella didn't rush into anything. They kept working together. But now there was this understanding between them, this possibility that made everything feel brighter. They started having lunch together most days, sometimes talking about work, sometimes about everything else. Isabella told him about growing up in Arizona with her grandmother after her dad left, about teaching herself to code at 12 on a borrowed laptop, about the year she lived in Morocco teaching English. Ryan talked about his family, his 3 younger sisters who thought he was too serious, his dream of maybe starting his own company someday. They went to a local art gallery on a Saturday, where Isabella explained modern art in a way that actually made sense to Ryan. They drove to the coast one Sunday and walked on the beach, and when Ryan mentioned he'd never tried surfing, Isabella immediately started planning lessons for the summer. Ryan's whole world was expanding. He tried Thai food for the first time, went to a salsa dancing class and was terrible but had fun anyway, started reading the poetry Isabella loved. He even changed his morning routine, sometimes sleeping in on weekends, sometimes going for spontaneous breakfast instead of his usual protein shake. His friend Carlos noticed the change. "You're different," he said one Thursday over lunch. "In a good way. You smile more. You actually laugh now." "It's Isabella," Ryan admitted. She makes everything more interesting." "So it's official? You two are together?" Ryan hesitated. That was the thing. They weren't exactly together. They spent tons of time with each other, clearly cared about each other, but neither of them had actually used words like dating or relationship. It was like they were both dancing around the label, afraid that naming it might break whatever magic they'd found. "It's complicated," Ryan finally said. Carlos gave him a look. "Ryan, man, don't wait too long to figure it out. Life's too short to dance around what you really want." That conversation stuck with Ryan. Maybe Carlos was right. Maybe it was time to actually talk about what they were doing, where this was going. He decided to bring it up that evening. He and Isabella were planning to work on the prototype at his apartment, something they'd been doing more often lately. Isabella arrived at 7 with takeout, and that smile that still made his heart skip. They ate and worked and joked around, and it all felt so natural, so right, that Ryan almost chickened out of the serious conversation. But then they were sitting on his couch, laptops on the coffee table, and Isabella was telling him about a job recruiter who'd reached out about a position in Boston, and Ryan felt a sudden cold fear in his stomach. Are you interested? He asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Isabella shrugged. I don't know. It's a good opportunity. More money. Bigger company, but... She trailed off. But what? She looked at him, really looked at him. But I'm actually happy here. Which is weird for me. Usually by now I'm already getting restless, planning my next move. But I keep thinking about staying. Ryan's heart was pounding. This was it. The moment to actually talk about what they were doing. Isabella, what are we? I mean, what is this? Between us? Isabella drew her knees up to her chest, a defensive posture Ryan had never seen from her before. I don't know. What do you want it to be? I want it to be real, Ryan said honestly. I want to stop dancing around it and actually admit that this matters. That you matter. To me. Isabella's eyes filled with something that might have been fear or hope or both. Ryan, I told you. I'm not good at this. At staying. At being someone's person. What if I mess this up? What if you don't? Ryan countered. What if you stay and it actually works and we build something good together? People don't stay for me, Isabella said quietly, and suddenly Ryan understood. This wasn't just about her pattern of leaving. It was deeper than that. Old wounds she'd mentioned but never really explained. Your dad? Ryan said softly. Isabella nodded, and Ryan saw her walls going up. He left when I was 7. Told my mom he was going to the store and just never came back. No note, no explanation. Just gone. My mom couldn't handle it. Started drinking. Got worse and worse until my grandmother finally got custody when I was 10. I learned early that people leave. It's just what they do. I'm not your dad, Ryan said. And you're not your mom. We get to write our own story, do we? Isabella's voice cracked slightly. Because every time I've tried to believe that, I've been proven wrong. People leave, Ryan. Or I leave first so it hurts less. Either way, it always ends. Not always, Ryan insisted. He moved closer to her on the couch. My parents have been married 35 years. My sister and her husband just celebrated their 10th anniversary. Good relationships exist, Isabella. They're possible. For other people, maybe. For us, Ryan said firmly, if we choose it, if we're brave enough to try. Isabella looked at him with those green eyes that had first captured his attention months ago. And if I'm not brave enough? If I wake up one day and panic and want to run? Then we talk about it, Ryan said. You don't have to run. You can just be honest about what you're feeling and we'll figure it out together. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, Ryan admitted. It's probably going to be hard sometimes. But I think it's worth it. I think you're worth it. Isabella closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, there were tears on her cheeks. I'm so scared, Ryan, I really like you. More than I've liked anyone in so long. And that terrifies me because liking someone means they can hurt you. Ryan gently wiped the tears from her face. I know, I'm scared too. You're the first person I've let myself care about since Rachel. But being scared together is still better than being safe and alone. Isabella laughed wetly. When did you get so wise? Someone taught me that playing it safe isn't the same as actually living, Ryan said with a small smile. They sat in silence for a moment, Isabella's head resting on Ryan's shoulder. Then she said quietly, I told the recruiter I'm not interested in the Boston job. Yeah? Yeah, I think I want to stay. For real this time. Not just in this city, but with you. If you'll have me with all my damage and fear and tendency to overthink everything at 2 a.m. I have my own damage, Ryan reminded her. My need for control and routine and my habit of shutting down when things get emotional. We're both kind of a mess. But maybe we can be a mess together, Isabella said. Yeah, Ryan agreed. Maybe we can. They stayed on that couch for hours talking about everything they'd been too scared to say before. About wanting to try a real relationship. About both of their fears and hopes. About the fact that it might not work, but they were willing to risk it anyway. When Isabella finally left around midnight, she paused at the door. Tomorrow I'm going to wake up and probably panic about all of this. That's okay, Ryan said. Call me when you do. We'll panic together. She kissed him then, soft and brief and full of promise. Okay, we'll figure this out together. After she left, Ryan lay in bed thinking about how far he'd come from that guy who'd built walls around his heart. How one dangerous smile had led to this moment, where he was choosing to be vulnerable again, choosing to risk pain for the possibility of something real. It was terrifying, but it was also the most alive he'd felt in years. And somewhere in the middle of his fear and hope, Ryan fell asleep smiling. Ryan should have known that nothing good comes easy. For a couple of weeks after that night, things were amazing. He and Isabella were officially together, not dancing around it anymore. They held hands at work, went on actual dates, talked about the future in concrete terms instead of hypotheticals. Then Isabella's grandmother got sick. Really sick. She was back in Arizona, and the doctors were saying it didn't look good. Isabella flew out immediately, and Ryan completely understood. He told her to take all the time she needed, that he'd handle the project, that family came first. "I'll be back in a few days," Isabella promised on the phone from the airport. "Just need to make sure she's okay and help my mom figure out care options." But a few days turned into a week, then 2 weeks. Isabella's grandmother didn't get better. She got worse, and Ryan could hear it in Isabella's voice every time they talked. This hollowness creeping in, this distance growing between them that had nothing to do with miles. "How is she?" Ryan would ask. "The same," Isabella would say. Or worse. "It's hard to tell anymore. How are you?" "Fine." But she wasn't fine. Ryan could tell. The woman who used to send him random texts throughout the day with silly memes or photos of interesting things she saw had gone quiet. Their calls got shorter, her responses to his messages more distant. After 3 weeks, Ryan was getting worried. Not just about Isabella's grandmother, but about Isabella herself. About them. "You should go out there," Carlos said when Ryan confided in him. "Don't wait for her to ask. Just go." "She said she needed space to deal with family stuff," Ryan argued. But even as he said it, he knew Carlos was right. So Ryan booked a flight for that Friday. He texted Isabella that he was coming, that he knew she said she needed space, but he wanted to be there for her anyway. She didn't respond right away, which made his stomach knot with anxiety. Finally, hours later, "Okay, just one word. Not welcoming, not rejecting. Just acknowledgement." The flight to Phoenix felt endless. Ryan kept second-guessing his decision. Maybe he should have listened when she said she needed space. Maybe showing up was pushing too hard, being too much. Maybe this was exactly the kind of thing that would make her want to run. But he also remembered what she'd said about being honest instead of running. So he was choosing to show up, to be there even if it was uncomfortable. Isabella picked him up from the airport. She looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back in a messy knot. They hugged, but it was stiff, awkward. Nothing like the easy affection they'd developed. The drive to her grandmother's house was quiet. Isabella stared out the window, barely talking. Ryan tried to make conversation, but everything felt forced. "You didn't have to come," Isabella finally said, her voice flat. "I wanted to," Ryan replied. "I wanted to be here for you. I'm fine." "Isabella, you're clearly not fine." She didn't respond, just kept staring out the window. And Ryan felt the distance between them like a physical thing, this wall going up that he didn't know how to get through. Her grandmother's house was small and warm, full of photos and the smell of decades of cooking. Isabella's mother was kind but clearly stressed. Ryan met various relatives who were coming and going, bringing food, sitting with the grandmother, supporting each other. And through it all, Isabella was like a ghost. She went through the motions, helped where needed, but Ryan could see she was shutting down, pulling away from everyone, including him. On the second night of his visit, after everyone else had gone to bed, Ryan found Isabella sitting on the back porch, staring at the desert stars. He sat down next to her without saying anything. They sat in silence for a while before Isabella finally spoke. "She raised me, you know. When my mom couldn't, she was the only person who never left." "I know," Ryan said softly. "And now she's leaving too. Not because she wants to, but because that's how life works. Everyone leaves eventually." "Isabella." "No, it's true." Isabella cut him off, her voice getting harder. "People leave. They die or they walk away or they just stop caring. And I was stupid to think it could be different." Ryan felt a cold fear settle in his chest. "Are we still talking about your grandmother?" Isabella was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I can't do this, Ryan." "Can't do what?" "This. Us. The trying to build something real." "I thought I could. I really did. But being back here, watching my grandmother fade away, seeing my mom fall apart again, it's reminding me why I don't stay. Why I can't let myself need people.